They say you can feel it before you know it. A gut instinct, a whisper of doubt in the back of your mind. That's how it started for me. My wife, Emma, had been distant. She wasn't outright ignoring me or picking fights. No, that would have been too obvious. But something had shifted. Her laughter didn't reach her eyes anymore. Our conversations felt forced. And when I touched her at night, she would tense up like she didn't want me there. I chalked it up to stress, maybe work, maybe family. I didn't want to be that guy who assumes the worst. But then came the night that changed everything. We were sitting at the dinner table, a half-empty bottle of wine between us, when she casually said, "What do you think about trying something new?" I raised my eyebrows, setting down my fork. Like what? Her smile was coy, like she already knew exactly what she wanted. "An experiment," she said, her tone light. But her eyes flickered with something darker. "To spice things up between us. Explore different experiences." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I laughed awkwardly, trying to read her face. "Are you serious?" "Why not?" she said, taking another sip of wine. "We've been married for 5 years. Don't you think it's time we tried something different?" I should have trusted my gut right then. My instincts were screaming at me to dig deeper, to ask why she was suddenly interested in something so out of character. But instead, I smiled weakly and said, "Sure. What do you have in mind?" Her face lit up like I'd just handed her the keys to the kingdom. "I was thinking we could invite someone else into the bedroom, just once. See how it feels." I froze. "Someone else? Like, who?" She didn't even hesitate. "My friend, Jessica. You've met her before." Jessica, her best friend. Blonde, beautiful, and way too flirty whenever she came over for drinks. I had noticed it before. How she would touch my arm when she laughed. How her eyes lingered a little too long on mine. But I'd always brushed it off as harmless. Now, it felt like a trap. "You want to bring Jessica into our bedroom?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Emma nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Just one night. No strings attached. It could be fun, right?" I should have said no. I should have put my foot down and told her this wasn't what I wanted. But the way she looked at me, so excited, so convinced that this was the answer to whatever unspoken problem we had, I didn't want to disappoint her. So, I nodded. "Okay," I said. "One time." The next night, Jessica showed up at our house wearing a dress so short it barely qualified as clothing. We had dinner, drank too much wine, and played a stupid board game that involved bending over and twisting our bodies into awkward positions. It all felt like a build-up to something I wasn't sure I wanted. By the time we stumbled into the bedroom, my head was spinning, and my judgment was shot. I don't remember much of what happened after that, just flashes of hands, lips, and laughter. When I woke up the next morning, Jessica was still there, curled up on the other side of the bed. Emma was already in the kitchen making breakfast, humming like it was just another normal day. I sat at the table staring at my plate of eggs and toast, trying to process what had just happened. Emma kissed me on the cheek and acted like everything was fine. Maybe for her, it was. But for me, something felt off. Later that day, as I was cleaning up the house, she casually said, "Tonight's my turn." I turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, you had fun last night," she said with a playful smirk. "Now it's my turn to experiment." My stomach dropped. I hadn't realized this experiment was supposed to be mutual. "Who are you inviting?" I asked, my throat tightening. She smiled sweetly, like she had this planned all along. "Remember my massage therapist? Alex? He's coming over tonight." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Alex, the guy she went to see every week at the spa. I'd never thought much of him before, but now the idea of him stepping into my house, into my bedroom, made my blood boil. "I don't think this is a good idea," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She rolled her eyes. "Don't be a hypocrite. You agreed to this. One night, remember?" I didn't know what to say. If I protested, she would accuse me of double standards. If I let it happen, I would be betraying every instinct I had. But I didn't want to look weak. So, like an idiot, I said, "Fine." That night, Alex arrived just as I was finishing my second glass of whiskey. He was tall, muscular, and annoyingly charming. Emma greeted him like an old friend, and I stood there feeling like an outsider in my own home. We had dinner, but I barely touched my food. My stomach was in knots. After dinner, Emma suggested they move to the bedroom, and I sat on the couch, gripping my glass like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The sounds that came from the bedroom tore through me like a knife. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and angry, but most of all, I felt stupid. I had agreed to this. I had let it happen. When the noises stopped, I waited for what felt like an eternity before Emma finally emerged from the bedroom, her hair messy and her cheeks flushed. Alex left shortly after, giving me a polite nod as if this was all perfectly normal. Emma sat next to me on the couch, her smile fading when she saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, as if she didn't already know. "What's wrong?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You just slept with another man in our bed, and you're asking me what's wrong." She crossed her arms defensively. "You slept with Jessica. This was the deal, remember?" "That wasn't the same," I snapped. "I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. But you've been seeing him for months, haven't you?" Her eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Don't be ridiculous." But I wasn't being ridiculous. I grabbed her phone off the coffee table and started scrolling through her messages. She lunged for it, but it was too late. I found the texts, hundreds of them. Flirty messages, pictures, and plans to meet up when I wasn't home. This wasn't just an experiment. It was an affair. I stood up, my hands shaking. "How long has this been going on?" "Does it matter?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, it matters," I yelled. "You lied to me. You used this experiment as an excuse to cheat." She broke down, sobbing, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt numb. I walked out of the house that night, needing time to think. But deep down, I already knew what I had to do. I didn't come back home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly, with no destination in mind, as memories of the past few months replayed over and over in my head. I couldn't believe how blind I'd been. All the signs were there, the distance, the late nights, the sudden obsession with spicing up our relationship, and now I knew why. Emma hadn't been looking for excitement with me. She'd already found it with Alex. This experiment wasn't about fixing our marriage. It was her way of easing me into accepting her betrayal. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, where the walls were thin and the bed smelled faintly of bleach. It wasn't glamorous, but it was far enough from home that I could breathe without the weight of her lies crushing me. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly my marriage had fallen apart. The next morning I drove back, my thoughts bouncing between anger, confusion, and a strange sense of finality. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I'd made my decision. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, her eyes puffy from crying. She looked up at me with hope, as if my return meant I was ready to forgive her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I dropped my keys on the counter and sat across from her. "How long?" I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, biting her lip. "A few months." I laughed bitterly. "A few months? So, while I was sitting here thinking you were at yoga or getting a massage, you were with him?" "It wasn't like that," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't plan to hurt you, it just happened." I leaned back in my chair, disgusted. "Don't give me that. Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice, Emma, over and over again, and then, instead of being honest, you dragged me into this sick little game to justify it." She sobbed harder, but I didn't feel any sympathy. I was done being the understanding husband who ignored the red flags. "I can fix this," she said, grabbing my hand. "We can fix this. Please, don't throw everything away." I pulled my hand back. "We didn't throw it away, Emma. You did." She begged me to stay, promising that it was over with Alex, that she would block him, delete his number, do whatever it took to make things right. And for a brief moment, I considered it. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the good memories, the dreams we once had. But then I remembered the messages, the way she looked at him, the sounds I heard coming from our bedroom. I could never forget that. "I need some time," I said, standing up. She nodded, wiping her tears. "Take all the time you need." But what I didn't tell her was that my decision had already been made. A few days later, I met with a divorce lawyer. Sitting in that office, signing papers that would officially end 5 years of marriage, felt surreal. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. But another part of me felt relief, like I was finally reclaiming my life after months of living in a lie. When I got back home, Emma was waiting for me in the living room, her suitcase by the door. I had asked her to stay with her parents while we figured out the details of the divorce, and to her credit, she agreed without much of a fight. "I hope you know that I still love you," she said, as she picked up her suitcase. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't love her anymore. Not after what she'd done. After she left, the house felt eerily quiet. I wandered through the rooms, unsure of what to do with myself. Our wedding photos stared back at me from the walls, a cruel reminder of what we had lost. I grabbed them one by one and stuffed them into a box, shoving it into the back of the closet where I wouldn't have to see them again. A week later, I got a text from Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since that night, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. But her message was simple. "Can we talk?" Curiosity got the better of me, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. When she walked in, she looked different, nervous, maybe even guilty. We ordered our drinks and sat at a corner table, away from the prying eyes of other customers. "I need to apologize," she said, stirring her coffee. "I didn't know Emma was using me to cover up her affair. If I had known, I never would have gone along with it." I studied her face, searching for any signs of deception, but she seemed genuine. "Did you two plan that night together?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. She called me last minute and said it was something you both wanted. I thought I was helping you guys reignite the spark in your marriage." She sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I feel stupid now." "You're not the one who should feel stupid," I said, bitterness creeping into my voice. Jessica hesitated, before speaking again. "Nothing actually happened between us that night," she admitted. "You passed out before anything could happen. Emma told me to just let you think it did." My heart skipped a beat. "Wait, what?" She nodded. "I left shortly after you fell asleep. Emma wanted you to believe we went through with it so you wouldn't question her affair with Alex." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. All this time I'd been beating myself up for something that didn't even happen, and Emma had let me believe it. "I'm sorry," Jessica said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. If I had known what she was really doing, I never would have gotten involved. I sat back, my mind racing. The betrayal ran even deeper than I thought. Emma had manipulated everything: my guilt, my trust, my entire perception of our marriage. "Thank you for telling me," I said, standing up. "I appreciate it." Jessica looked like she wanted to say more, but I wasn't in the mood for any heart-to-hearts. I left the coffee shop, my mind made up. There was no chance in hell I was giving Emma another shot. When I got home, I packed the rest of her things into boxes and called a moving service to drop them off at her parents' house. By the end of the day, there was no trace of her left in the house. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the couch, staring out the window as the sun set. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. But it wasn't over yet. A few weeks passed and life started to settle. The divorce papers were filed. Emma had moved in with her parents, and I was slowly adjusting to being alone. But one evening, as I was scrolling through social media, something caught my eye. A picture of Emma. She was at a bar with Alex, laughing, her hand resting on his leg. I wasn't surprised. I had already suspected they'd pick up right where they left off. But seeing it was a punch to the gut. It wasn't the jealousy. It was the reminder that she had never really tried to fix things. Her promises to cut him off had been lies, just like everything else. The next morning, I blocked. her number, deleted her from my contacts, and unfollowed her on every platform. There was no reason to keep any connection. I needed to move forward, and that's when Jessica reached out again. She showed up at my door with a bottle of wine, saying she just wanted to check on me. One glass turned into two, then three, and before I knew it, we were sitting on the couch laughing like old friends. But this time, it felt different. When she kissed me, it wasn't like the awkward, forced experiment Emma had orchestrated. It felt real. I don't know what the future holds with Jessica, and honestly, I'm not in a rush to define it. What I do know is that I've gained something better than revenge or closure. I've gained freedom, and that's all I need.